Listen to that. Can we hear that? Can you hear the quiet stillness of high G's? It's because I'm on my own in the loft this week. It was quite nice the last 2 weeks on the show, having a guest in here. So we're back to online tonight. My guest comes from deepest, darkest Berkshire. And if I've got that wrong, he'll correct me. I've got a big intro for him as well. Maybe I won't actually tell you who he is, and I'll just see if you can recognise him when he comes on. No, you're not in yet. So anyway, listen, I'm really excited to introduce my guest to you tonight. I first met this gentleman over 20 years ago now. And first time I met him was at High Wycombe down at Strike Command. And he actually, I first met him down there, and we must have left the Air Force within months of each other. And the reason that I know that this, and there wasn't long between us both leaving the RAF, and the reason I know this is because it was this gentleman this evening that helped me get my foot in the door, I would say. It helped me speak to somebody to get an interview, and what resulted in my first job post RAF. So props to you for that. He also then, once I left that job and we kind of went our own ways, I moved back to Scotland. We reconnected online and have spoken through the power of social media. And last year he became of all things, the best way of describing it was like almost an online gardening consultant. When we'd pulled together sort of a few groups on Facebook to get people talking, and he came on to a number of the sessions, was quite vociferous in kind of leading conversations and chipping into conversations. For anybody that knows him will know he was always great at doing. So without further ado, let me introduce you tonight to my good friend in the hood. We can see his name now. He'll rub his face.
That's really about as young as I could possibly get, really.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. Hello, everyone. Not seen many of you for, God, an age. And why is it, right? Why so many people that I knew all those years ago have gone bald? And I've gone grey. And Pinky, you're a fucking vampire. Look at it. You look the same. He doesn't get old, does he? I mean, look, he's still got his dark hair. He's still got those chiseled looks about him. Don't see any extra body poundage, unlike Kerslake, who's like someone's put an air hose up his arse and turned it on. And look at you. I mean, I look weathered. Face like a slapped arse. Perfect place for radio and mine.
Mate, thank you very much. This is your show tonight. I'm supposed to be dishing out the compliments to you, but I'll take it. Thank you.
I read your book, and I'm sure I might have been in there somewhere. Not quite sure.
I'm pretty sure you are.
I think I was. But that's true for those that are watching. I left in November of 2000. My daughter was born the following January, and I was very lucky to get into an IT company after sort of 2 years doing an HNC at college. And then I got into this company, and they were looking for people. And like me, it was like low-level tech support, but it was a step in to the corporate world. And I went, I know someone who's going to be perfect for this role. And I think we worked together for about, what, a year? 18 months?
A year. Yeah,
it was about a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, in fact, I'll tell you, there's 2 or 3 things that I remember from that year. Obviously, you taught me quite a lot because you'd been in there longer, and I remember sort of setting up labs to kind of run demos and stuff like that on recreating user issues, which we'll not go into because we'll just bore people. We're just techie IT geeks, unless you work in IT.
Yeah.
But I remember the stuff that I learned and that you taught me, how patient you were, more patient than I ever remembered you being when you were in the Air Force. The other thing I used to love when we eventually just got our arses out of the office for that hour at lunch to go to the gym to like, you know, get a bit of a sweat on, have a bit of a sauna. I remember doing that, and it wasn't all the time, but we kind of got into that bit of a routine. And the third thing that I remember was that it was at CompuWare when 9/11,
Yes.
and I remember it being on one of the TVs just outside that boss that I didn't like.
Sarah Saltzman. Yeah, she was a card, wasn't she?
Oh yeah,
she was a love.
Yeah, I remember being there when on the tellies came like 9/11. It's one of those I always remember where I was that day, and I remember the two of us going, "What the fuck?" So yeah, a year, and then I went off to 3. So yeah.
Yes, I was devastated because I thought we made a very good team. I don't know if you remember or not. There was a pub in Slough near where the CompuWare office was, and it was called the 3 Tons, and it was an absolute shithole. I mean, it was not a nice pub. And I always remember the story about going there. We went there for lunch, and you and I both worked with a guy from Portugal by the name of Paulo Silva.
Paulo, yeah, good guy.
So he was very fussy with his food, and he ordered egg and chips. And so they said to the guy behind the bar, you know, egg and chips, and they plonked it down, and sort of threw the cutlery at him and plonked down the ketchup and walked away. And he went, "This egg's really greasy. I'm going to ask them if they can cook me another." I went, "I wouldn't if I was you." He went, No, I'll do this. Went up to the bar and he went, "Yeah, they're going to cook me another." 5 minutes later, the guy had brought the same plate back down, but on the egg was small bits of cotton that clearly had come from a bar towel. They just put on it, wiped it and pulled it off again, but left all the bits of little black hair. So it was always known as Paulo's Hairy Egg Pub, and we never went back.
Oh yes, good fond memory. Right?
Fond memories. Yeah. By the way, if I have to go for a piss, it's probably a prostate thing. We just get old. Don't worry about that.
It's just an age thing, mate.
Or I could piss in my son's bedroom and just blame him when he comes back from uni.
You're not that old yet.
My son's a dirty little shagger. Do you know what he did? He went down to uni, and Lena, my wife, made some homemade limoncello. And you know how in the first year of uni you're in halls of residence and you get you and sort of 9 others. Well, he had 8 girls and 1 nerdy boy and him with his limoncello. And apparently I said to him, "Is that your date, rape, drug of choice?" But he said, "No, all the girls like it." He said, "But they're all sort of following me around." I mean, "So what have you got? A Monday and a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and every time you want to go near him, you dish out the limoncello?" He went, "Yeah, pretty much." I'm like, "You dirty little sod." Doesn't get that from me, I swear.
That's rude. Anyway, should we talk about some music?
Yes. Yeah. This was really interesting because you know how you said sort of pick 5 songs. Do you know how difficult it is to pick 5 songs?
Everybody said the same. They've just said it's almost impossible to choose because there's so many. And when you think of, you know, events in your life and things that bring back memories, there's quite often not a day that will go by where you don't hear something where you go, "Oh my God, that reminds me of that," or that. So, and for me, you know, Dave interviewed me a couple of weeks ago, and I'd been thinking about it since I started this, what mine would be, and I even changed my mind the night before as well. So I know how hard it is.
Yeah, and I changed it several times. Dave Large hasn't changed at all. He's still as lovely as ever, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's just a bloke you want to go out and give a big hug to.
I do every time I see him. The only problem is it kind of feels like I only reach his waist. And I realised that when
too tall for you.
Yeah, I realised that when we had our picture taken, both here, the picture that's now the front cover of the podcast, which just makes me look like a wee tiny man. Like Dave
and his puppet Graham. Your face chat.
Yes, a lovely little man. So
By the
anyway,
way,
yes,
your studio looks like a murder venue. I've seen on the horror films where they say don't go in the basement or go up to the loft.
What,
It
high
does
G?
look, yeah, it does look a little bit like a murder studio. Got any bodies hanging around behind them?
Have I not told you about Karen's business?
What, you've murdered your wife?
No, it doubles as like so high G's during the night and like dominatrix studio by day.
Well, whatever floats your boat, or not, as the case may be.
She's gonna absolutely murder me for saying that now.
Do you know what? I remember a time there was
Or
me and
put
you.
me in a spiked dog collar maybe, and walk me
Going to
along
go
the
the
road.
same way as was it Edward II? Hot poker up the arse. I talking of your lovely wife, I remember a time when I was genuinely terrified of her. You and I had gone over to the Naffy for a quick drink. About 4 hours later, with 6 sheets to the wind, staggering around and pinballing all over the place. And you were late getting back. And then Karen walked into the Naffy and she looked at me like it was my fault and she shot me some daggers and I was literally absolutely terrified of her. I was like, oh my God. In my head, it was like, I love Karen. She's brilliant. She's really funny, but she's really angry at me. And now I feel really bad. And all I can do is sit here and grin like an idiot and try not to be sick. It was excellent. I was like, hello.
Yeah, I'm quite used to that now, but it still scares me.
So let's get into music.
Yes, let's. So the first one, which wasn't the first one originally,
no,
but it was on the list. It was on the original list. I remember when I first heard these as well, but I'm interested to hear your story for Madness, One Step Beyond.
Right. So, as soon as I could crawl, I started listening to music. And back in the day in South Essex, in a village that produced Andy Mason and another village that produced Rob Huff, I had some 50p pocket money, and literally every day I would go around to the record shop after school and I would flick through stuff. And the first time I ever heard One Step Beyond absolutely blew my mind. Absolutely blew my socks off. Notwithstanding that Chaz Mash goes, hey, you, don't watch that, watch this. But as soon as that saxophone hits, I don't care where you are. I don't care what you're doing. If you're at a party or in a pub, you have to put your beer down and dance. Every wedding I've ever been to, every naffy bop I've ever been to, every time I've ever heard it, I was even in the car driving to an IT company I worked for in Milton Keynes called Airwatch. And it came on the radio and I was in the car doing this, right? But I didn't realize I'd stopped at the lights and this bloke next to me was looking at me and I'm giving it like this. It's just an amazing, amazing song. It's actually a cover version from an old reggae song because when ska came about, it was a mixture of reggae and like a more upbeat tempo. But I've been a lifelong fan of Madness. When I was in the mob, I was on the Type 91 at Portreath and we went away to one of the naval bases and we were shooting off the range there. Went to the Naffy and basically all we played all night was Madness and all the Navy guys were looking at us like we're weird. But it was just brilliant. And I love every single thing about Madness. And even now, most of them have got their old age pensioners bus pass. Suggs can still look it and he can still do it.
Yeah, they still tour, don't they? They still do on these some of these
sellout.
Yeah,
sellout. And the other thing that's funny about that, if you ever sort of see a Madness tour online or whatever, and you look in the audience, there's loads of bald blokes that look like Buster Bloodvessel from Bad Manners.
Yeah,
all wearing t-shirts with all their mates, all doing this as well. And I think that literally is me.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that I'm not stockily built, so there'll be like this middle-aged flabby guy with grey hair and glasses next to all these big burly blokes giving it like this. But I love it. I've always loved it. And if you don't love Madness One Step Beyond, you deserve to die a terrible, horrible death. That's all I'm saying on it. So I mean, seriously, put it on next time you're in the car. Put it on Spotify. Shut your eyes and just listen to it. And I defy anyone to not go. I want something like that.
We got. I'll get it added to the JFDI podcast playlist on Spotify, which is getting extremely large now.
Yeah.
There's
I don't ever think of anything other than positive when you listen to that song.
Yeah,
because it makes you smile inside, right?
it does. It does. So here's a question related to what you've just spoken about there.
Mm.
You mentioned Naffy Bops, and you're talking about madness.
Mm-hmm.
Which Naffy Bop, at which did you experience the most madness?
Cultural. Without a
Culture.
shadow of a doubt. I remember, some of you may not remember him, a guy called Malcolm Ashley. There was me and him dancing to Walking on Sunshine together, and the entire place was empty apart from me and him. Like, everyone was sitting at their table. There's me and Malcolm Ashley doing that. I remember Jim Bowen one Christmas doing Bullseye, and I won a teddy bear that was about 4 foot high. So I go on the stage and I say to Jim Bowen, like, again, madness had been on, I was pissed up, covered in sweat, won this raffle, walked up there, and Jim Bowen is here, and I said, goes, "Oh, you've got the teddy," and I whispered in his ear, and I went, "Can I have the bottle of vodka instead?" And he went, "No, fuck off." And the whole place just heard me to go, and I had to walk down the steps with this yellow teddy that's about 4 foot high under my arm. You know, clearly my chance of getting laid that night went even worse than it was before I started. So, just give it up. Yeah, Frankie Blunden drinking Pernod and Black. Yeah, and Jim Bowen was shit, mate. The other thing that was always a good fuel in the Naffy at Cultural was snake biting black with a depth charge of Drambury in it. And yeah, and you had 2 of those, and you can forget what day it was.
Oh, crikey!
Yeah.
What other lethal concoctions do you remember?
Baileys and lime. I was never a Baileys and lime fan, but the girls called it cheesy helmet or something, and it congeals and it looks like clotted cheese. It just looks awful. Now, I don't drink Baileys anyway because, you know, I don't like cream and I don't like milk, so anything that sort of thing makes me good. But if you just try this at home, kids, get a small glass of Baileys and put a dash of lime in it and watch, and it kind of sludges and congeals, and it looks like either diarrhea or earwax in a glass. And people were drinking that. I was just like, no.
Is it just all congeal? Does it just all
horrible? It looks like a cross between like filler that's gone wrong. The filler you put on the walls.
Yeah.
You leave it for a couple of weeks, it goes all clumpy. And yeah, it just looks like it's just evil lives there. Don't do it. No, just don't. Just don't.
So not your first go-to drink then?
No. Funny enough, no. I do have a good old Auntie Stella. It's always been the tipple of choice. Wintertime, it's normally this or Guinness. Summertime, it's definitely cider.
Yeah. Well, I better ask you this one now because this is one for the end, but we're on topic. So I was going to ask you beer or wine or shots or all.
All. Although real ale, that's up the road from us, there's a brewery called Tring Brewery, and there's a member there 2 nights a year. You go up there and you can drink all the free real ale that you want. Right.
Nice.
So literally, you go up there about 6:30, you queue up, you give your little token in, and there's just reams and reams of barrels of stuff. A bit like the old Norwich Beer Festival when we was at Neatishead, which was a classic place to go and get, you know. Anyway, it's great, but real ale and me, 24 hours later, I've got the best roses in Aylesbury, is all I'm telling you. And there's a hole in the ozone layer above Bambury Towers. It's literally don't light a match because the whole place is going to go. It's just awful. But
is that you giving away your secrets to your great garden?
What, me shitting on it? No, that's down to the dogs. No, I very rarely shit on my own back garden. Like, you don't shit on your own doorstep, but I might do it in the back garden when the wife's not there and I'm caught short. Although, to be fair,
God. I think we need to move on to the next song.
From my back garden to the toilet to actually drop one is only about 20 feet. So, you know, it's the height of laziness if I go, no, I'm just going to leave it here. Got 2 small white dogs whose shits are about that big. If they see one about that long, the wife's going to be like, that's you, isn't it? It's like, no. Just too lazy to go in there. So, yeah, I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, let's go to your next song.
Quite possibly.
Right. So, next song is the Fatback Band.
Oh God, this is an anthem. Yeah. So let me tell you about this. I'm going to go way back in time in history. So this skinny, spotty Essex lad, secondary school, wanted to be into banking. So at school, they had a work experience week. So I wrote this really big, long letter about how I wanted to get into banking. Finance is the way of things, blah, 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 blah. So they read it and they put me in a garage, right? So I had to work in a parts department of a garage in Southend. And the guy there was a civilian instructor in the Air Cadets. So he said, come down and do this, because I had nothing better to do. Kicking around in a little village other than vandalising bus stops, there wasn't a lot to do. Frankie's been there. He knows what it's like. It's like the dot above the I and the word shit. So it's not a place you really want to go and visit. So anyway, I joined the Air Cadets for something to do. So I lived in Thundersley, which is the top of the hill, and the Air Cadets in Benfleet, which is the bottom of the hill. And I went down there, and the first person I met through the door was Andy Mason. I knew him from secondary school because he was a year above me, and he's been a lifelong friend since I was 15, and he's still my friend all these years later. And through him, I got to know some of the other lads in the Air Cadets. And as we got a bit older, we'd go and blag ourselves into nightclubs in Southend. There was one called Rain, and there was one called Tots, which was Talk of the South. It was the big nightclub in the southeast. In reality, it was just full of chavvy Essex girls dancing around handbags, but you got to give it a go. To get in, you had to have ID. Now, at 16, I wasn't particularly tall. I was very spotty, and I looked like about 5, right? But back in the day, in order to prove you're 18, we used to get in by showing them video club cards, because to join a video club, you need to be 18. And my brother had the same 2 initials as me. So I got in through this. And one of the first songs I ever heard was Fatback Band, I Found Love In. And then since that song first hit, literally every time I was in a nightclub and that come on, the dance floor just flooded with people. Now it's good, but it just sounds a bit dated. But back in the day, it was one of those songs, a bit like The Madness, where you drop your drink and go dancing. And I just remember a whole circle of Air Cadets giving it, I found love. And these same Air Cadets, about 20 years later, met in the village where I was born, at Tandoori restaurant. And they had a sort of it's a big restaurant, but they also have a big dance floor. So you go for the whole evening, you have your food, and then you just go dancing. And it was on there as well, and it was great. It was just like brilliant, So it's one of those, sort of listening to it now, it sounds really dated, but yeah, it's in the memory,
Yeah, just in the bank.
It is. It's in the bank. You're right. And that was pre everything. That was pre RAF. That was pre marriage 1, pre marriage 2, pre kids, pre grey hair, pre alcoholism.
Was the cadets was that your way in? Was it that kind of like chance meeting that took you to the cadets, which ultimately took you to the Air Force, or was there another reason for you wanting to join?
As a boy, I was always interested in military history. My uncle was like my granddad because he was 20 years older than my dad, and I didn't know my granddad when he died before I was born. And my uncle was served in the Second World War, so he would just enthrall me for hours about experiences that he had. And he actually got lost in the desert for 2 or 3 days, and he came back and he got a medal for it. And I was just raptured by this guy. He was my absolute hero.
Wow.
And
what do you remember about that story?
What?
About him being lost in the desert?
He basically was in part of a convoy, and he was in the artillery, and basically the convoy got attacked. And he basically wandered away from the wreckage, and he was essentially, I think it might have been the Sahara, I don't know, or the Gobi, but he wandered around for 2 days before being picked up and brought back.
Yeah.
And he says it so matter-of-factly at the time. He was always saying, he goes, yeah, it's only a couple of days in the desert. I'm like, have you seen the desert? There's hot. There's nothing there. You can't find your way. You've got no compass. There's no water. You can't eat anything. There's a lot of sand. It gets cold at night, and you just brushed it off like it was a couple of days jolly bimbling around the woods, So he was always like, he was my absolute hero. And when I wanted to do the military thing, initially I thought, I'll go into the army. Then I realized they sort of wander around outside in the shit and the mud. And then the Navy boats made me sick. And I joined the cadets, and I loved it. And what happened was, and I was really influenced by this, Andy went first. And then Rob went a year later. And I kind of looked at my 2 friends and I went, right, where are you going? What are you doing? And they said, right, we're going to go and do this thing called aerospace systems operator. Andy went first, and I was originally going to go in the RF police, and I thought, nah, that's going to be bollocks. You just be standing on the gate all day. And then Rob went, I was like, well, look, there's going to be a chance I'll bump into them at some point. So I joined as well. And bugger me, my first posting was Neatishead, and it was Rob Huff and Andy Mason. And I remember going up there with Frankie Blunden, and literally we kicked the door in of our accommodation block, dropped the stuff down, and Huffy went, right, toga night at the Naffy Bop, rip off the sheet from your bed, wrap it round you, put a belt round and come down there. And then I woke up the following day, God knows what. And I lost many a good night down there, I tell you. You know.
So when was that? What was that? 1980?
1988. There'll be some names here. In my intake at Swinderby, there was, would you believe it, there was me, there was Frankie Blunden, and there was Baz Harradine in the same room. I gave Frankie Blunden his nickname. His real name is Carrie. It's not Frankie.
Yeah.
For those that don't know. And it was because he had a really bad beret like Frank Spencer. And the first noise I ever heard out of Carl Harradine's mouth was, all right, boys, anyone here from Birmingham? I was like, Christ, it's Barry from Alvida's Aim Pet. And that's how they stuck. And he was hung over the balcony by some regiment guys that night by his feet. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, remember that story?
Baz was.
No, Frankie was. Yeah, that was when we went that night. We got to Neatishead. That's why Cultural. Yeah, we all basically we got into the block. They realised he was a new guy, so they hung him out the window of Brown Block by his feet.
Crikey.
Yeah, good job he was wearing pants that night, because if the toga had fallen forward, you would have seen his wee winky, which you don't really want to see, do you? Well, maybe his wife Karen does, clearly, but you know. But yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved Neatishead. That whole time between 18 and like 21, best time ever.
Yeah,
we were all completely immature. Work was a minor inconvenience to having a laugh, and I just loved it. I loved every single thing about it, and even now I look back. And I can honestly say all of my time in those first 3 years were just an absolute blast. We was with Jim Slevin, there was Gary McVeigh, there was Malcolm Ashley, there was Frankie, there was Andy Clark, there was Gary Short. There were so many guys there. Sarah Brooker, there was Carol, there was Angie. There was just so many people, and I'm sorry if I've forgotten your names on it, those that are watching this.
Carol.
I think she's Carol Deakin now, I think.
Carol Deakin. And Angie Charles.
Sorry?
And Angie.
Angie Charles, yeah. I worked with Angie in the sim thing, and she was brilliant. I remember, because she was Essex as well. And she was Essex with a proper accent as opposed to my Thames Valley accent. And bless her, she said something about her sister being prettier than her. And she went, it doesn't really matter. I'm a bit more of a slag than she is. And we're like, what? She was brilliant. Mark Butler was quality, because there was me, there was Angie, there was Mark, there was Frankie, all in the sim section there. Phil Hume was a corporal. He was lovely. Ian Pluck was lovely. I just met so many lovely people. So many lovely people. And I honestly say, I'd say between 89 when I first got there to when I left in must have been 91, 92. Then I went down to Portreath. Just met so many lovely people. Brilliant guys.
So in that time, we can cast the net. Like during that time, big change, which I've got a question about change, but I think I'll leave it until later. Around that time, kind of, formative years, if you will, going from being a boy into, becoming a man, or, boy in a man's body, depending on which way you want to look at it.
No, it's more the other way around. It was like an immature child in a Spotty Irk's body, frankly. But yeah, go on.
What would you say in those sort of formative years was the best advice you were ever given?
The one that I ignored: don't get married too young. Because at Neatishead at the time, and there are so many people that I remember from around that time, everyone was getting married in their early 20s. So off the top of my head, there was me, there was Frankie, Dougie Greenhouse, Rob Huff. I think Andy got married a bit later. Patsy Sherrod, legend announced, she's lovely as well. So many people got married young. And, and years later, when I was at CompuWare after you left, I actually got, I couldn't wait to do this. I got a demo at RAF Waddington. And I got invited to the Sergeant's Mess, and Andy was there, Huffy was there, John Knox was there, Dougie Greenhalgh was there, Tony Gill was there. And literally we sat around there, and there was some oik that had been in 10 minutes sitting there. So I was a token civvy amongst all these old sweats and vets. And I sort of drunkenly said, stick your hand up if you've been married before. And everyone done that. Right? Literally round the table. And there's one little bloke with his hand out like that. And literally all went, give it time.
Now you see, I fall into that category as well. I was married to Mrs. Richardson extremely young.
Yeah, but you've stayed the course.
Yeah, 20.
And I think it puts a lot of pressure on. It puts a lot of pressure on people that don't understand the lifestyle. Right, a lot of pressure. Certainly, when I was down in Portreath, me and my ex-wife, we struggled. We struggled financially. We struggled just to understand. We moved from Norfolk to Cornwall. Literally, I think it was a week after we got back from our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Went down there, and it was the biggest recession ever. So she couldn't get work.
This is when you were posted to Portreath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Met some lovely people down there again. I keep saying about how lovely people were. Shona, she was brilliant down there. Adi Mansbridge. Too many folk to mention. Steve Poole. Just so Dave Restle. Dave Restle was really, really good to me. He was so good to me. Took me under his wing, and he sort of fatherly told me to grow up and sort my shit out. And he was brilliant. Never fault the guy. And even when he went to Wickham at the end, he was still looking after me, although I was about 10 years older. But yeah. And I think we went down to Cornwall, and I think one of the things was it doesn't prepare you to grow up so quick. And I think the shock to the system was, hang on a minute, I was getting shit-faced with my mates in the NAFI. Now you're telling me I've only got 50 quid left for the month and there's 3 weeks left, kind of thing. You know, you grow up very quickly. And I think it takes a toll on the marriage young when you have two people, one, so like she was bored all day. And I'm doing a 12-hour day shift on a Saturday or a 12-hour night shift on a Saturday. And she had nothing to do, nowhere to go. I've got the car, she's sitting at home, you know. So I think, you know, it took a lot of toll, took a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. Lot of pressure and a lot of adapting. You know. I've got a question here about that. Throughout your time, I mean, this doesn't even have to be in the Air Force. It can be, you know, beforehand or afterwards. But what would you say is the biggest change that you've ever had to make? And that's one that, well, I mean, any change. That could be one that you've kind of decided, you know what, it's time I have to do this, or one that's been thrust upon you that you weren't expecting and that you might have resisted, or you know, whatever. What's the, you know?
It's an interesting concept, because when you say the biggest change, I think there's been loads of changes.
Yeah,
and it's a bit like only now at the end you finally understand, because if I cast my mind back, so I went down to Portreath, did a great job down there, loved it. From a military perspective, the CO was a squadron leader, and he said, you've got to have at least 8 secondary duties to do well, otherwise we're going to mark you down. And I was like, hang on a minute, that's not fair. Victim of circumstance, maybe. Attitude, maybe. But it was a case of the rules have changed, and I wasn't adapting quick enough to the rules. And I think the RAF was always a numbers game, particularly with where we were with the Trade Group 12 at the time, with the Cold War coming to an end. And, you know, going down to Portreath, I had loads of different things I was going on, and I loved it. I think a lot of it was focused around life on camp. But when it shut down and we went to Wickham, it was different again. And I think one of the things that I've always found out about myself is I get bored very quickly. And I don't like being bored. Now, years later, I did a...
leads to dangerous situations for me. I think you're probably the same.
Yeah, but I think I did there's a thing called Myers-Briggs type indicator. And I did that. And you ask a series of questions and it crunches the numbers and basically gives you 4 letters on what your personality type is like. And then it references those as in your good points and your bad points. So one of the bad points for me is you must always be kept busy and you don't like being bored. Right. And I think, I wish I'd taken that test about 25 years ago, because then, doing 12-hour day shifts at Wickham on a Sunday, I could understand while I'm walking around going, Christ, I'm bored. What am I going to do with myself? And I think when you talk about adapting to change, it's more a case of, a lot of the time when I was in the RAF, it was turn up because you have to be there, and that was it. Right. Now, in my life after the RAF, working with IT, you have different choices and you adapt to different situations. I think we have the safety net of security, as in you're not going to get fired. But going towards the end of my time in the RAF, I was like, right, I need to make a change. I tried commissioning. My fighter controller course didn't really come at the best time because my marriage was going down the toilet. Postings, various things that had gone on. And I thought, right, I reached the point when I was about 25, just after I got to Wickham, thinking, right, this is not for me anymore. Because it's all I'd known, I was pretty sort of scared. It was like, well, I could always go and work for Dixon's, or I could always go and work for Tesco's. And there's nothing wrong with those jobs, but I wanted something else. And I remember back in the day when I worked with Steve Martin and Mark Kerslake, we basically discovered these things called Windows 95, which is a new computer system. I thought, oh, this is quite funky. I quite like this. And I got on some courses, and I'd never in any time in the RAF taken any kind of education allowance. But I thought, right, I've got to put a plan in place. So for my last 2 years of service, I went to Aylesbury College and did an HNC in computing. And that was the biggest thing that really made me go, wow, because I met so many people that weren't in the military, and it opened my eyes to a completely new world. Yeah. Because 18 to 30, that's all I'd ever known, right? And when you reach that kind of thing where you think, right, I'm now going to make this great big leap of faith, you also don't appreciate how challenging it can be until you actually go through it yourself. It's a bit like sort of going to basic training, right? So you kind of go, well, I'm a little bit scared. I don't know what's going to go on, but hopefully I'll be okay. And I left home at 18 and I said to my mum and dad, there's no way on God's earth I'm coming back to Essex unless I'm unemployed, wearing clothes that I've wet myself in, that I've laid on the street for a couple of weeks, and I've got an alcoholic habit, right? So not too far from the truth then, really. I'm still employed, but I can still go back. So what happened was, when Lena found out that she was pregnant, and I'm glad it was by me, because it was, that was an achievement in itself. I was like, yeah. We went to an NCT birthing class thing, and I sat next to a guy, and we got on really well, and we were messing around and laughing and joking. And he said, what do you do? I said, I'm leaving the RAF. I'm looking to get into IT. He goes, I work in an IT company called CompuWare. Give me your CV and I'll put it in for you. And I got the interview. And the day of the interview, I was interviewed by that Sarah woman that you know.
Yeah.
And Colin was the team leader. Then it was Sarah, the manager. Then it was Jane, who was the senior manager. So I had 4 hours of interview back to back from walking to the door and leaving. And I got the job. So I think through all of that, it's almost like you can try and push yourself that way, but it's almost like if you're not destined to go that way, then you'll just go back that way.
Yeah.
And you keep doing it and keep doing it and keep trying. And then you go, oh, like, fuck it. I'm just not going to do it anymore. I've given up trying, because you'll end up somewhere else, right? I mean, like, take you, for example. You've done your time. I put the word in for you. You got the job, right? Yeah. And that, like me, it kept you employed and kept the money coming in until you realised what you wanted to do. And I was gutted when you left to Scotland. I was like, how dare he?
Yeah, I might have left for Scotland, but here we are in 2021, and I still wonder what I want to do.
I've got my eyes on retirement. I was like,
yeah, I think I'm clearer. I think I'm clearer on what I want to do now. But it's still. I just think that bit that you talked about there about getting to the point, and I see this in discussions with people, and I think you do hear of people now that will actually, like you said, get to a point where do you know what? I'm comfortable. I might not be as happy as I could be, but they do let the fear of what might happen or the fear of failure get in the way of actually trying something, right?
It's
And I think that's where, you know, a lot of these discussions have kind of eked out things like, do you know what? I've made this decision and I've made this decision along the way. And do you know what? That was a shit decision. That didn't work out very well. But do you know what? I learnt from it and then I moved on in another direction. And like you say, I might have, you know, it's been like this. But do you know what? All those lessons along the road, how many of them wouldn't have been learned if I hadn't just actually decided to do something? And that, I think, you know, that's part and parcel about of kind of, you know, what so much of this is about is that, you know, for whatever reason, people can get stuck, can't they? And just, you know, not know what the move is. And the right move is just freaking sometimes any move.
Yeah, I think, you know, definition of success in the military was you had to be promoted.
Yeah.
Right. I left the military and I was on, well, so overnight my salary doubled when I joined an IT company at CompuWare. So straight away I was like, oh, I'm worth more than a rat thinks I am. That's good. I was there for a few years and I had a few pay rises. A friend of mine that I worked with said, I'm going to this company. I'll see you in 6 months. I said, why is it? Because I'll get you a job in there. Okay, fair enough. Truth be told, he rang me out at 6 months and he goes, right, if you want to come and join this company, whatever salary you're on, put 20 grand on it and they'll pay it. I was like, what? He went, yeah, do it. And I did it.
Yeah.
And I bounced around with other companies. I got promoted. I changed companies. I went back to doing like a technical demonstration, what they call pre-sales role. And I was working for a company called Airwatch in Milton Keynes who do mobile device management. And I had a phone call out of the blue from Rupert Wills, who you and I worked with at CompuWare.
Sure, yeah.
That was 6 years ago in April next year. And he said, I do this product called electronic signatures. I need some help. Do you want to come work for me? Well, the guy taught me how to demonstrate software to people. So why wouldn't I go? I've been there ever since. It's been brilliant. And I think...
Is Rupert still there?
Yeah, he's my manager.
Is he?
Yeah, so your manager is someone that you're friends with for 22 years. I get away with quite a lot, to be fair. Although we are the oldest kids on the block. The young ones there are like in their 30s. So when we talk about shit like watching Blue Peter and Scooby-Doo, they look at us and say, what are you talking about? You know, it's like...
Yeah. Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. Shall we do another song?
Yes, let's.
Right then. So, number 3, on the Hot on the Heels of Madness and the Fatback Band, we've got Pulp. Something changed.
Now, this was a... This song always puts hairs on my arms. I mean, I've got hairs anyway. It's not like I'm sort of, you know, I listen and they grow. They've always been there. They just sort of point upwards, you know.
Makes
bit like page 3. Bit like page 3 when I was 15. It always makes it point upwards. And so this particular song, and everyone's going to go, slushy. So I was at Wickham. I was back in the bunker after doing a day job, which didn't go well. And we won't say any more about that. Went back into Wickham. My marriage had failed. I was working part-time with 2 jobs to make ends meet because of the financial state I was in after getting divorced. And I was on shift with Tony Nethercliff, who's still a good friend of mine, and he's still bald. So he's another one, although he got bald about 30 years ago. I think he was born bald, never had any hair, and he's just stayed bald. It's a bit like Matt Lucas. And Dave Tedman, who was on our shift. And I sat there one day and I was feeling a bit shit for myself and going, I don't really want to go back to my shit life. I bought a 1-bedroom house at the time. And I was with Frank Cable and Paul Gittins, and they were brilliant. And I love them to bits. They were just so understanding, so kind, so helpful, so fatherly and friendly. They just really brought me up. And I was doing this 12-hour shift, and it was a Friday night, I think it was. And it was one of those awful ones where it was like in between day shift and night shift, but you don't really want to go out. But you know, Nethercliff goes, come on, let's go out for a couple of beers. I was like, no, I don't want to go. I've got to get up to go back to my shift. No, come out. I went out, and there's a pub in Aylesbury called the Bell, and this is a God's honest truth, and those that know me will look at me and go, what? We walked into the Bell, walked to the bar, and there was a girl over my shoulder there, and she looked at me and smiled, and I was like that. Oh, me? And she was like, yeah. It's like, yeah, hi. I was like, oh, hi. Didn't know what to say. I was feeling a bit lousy. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a boost. Because like, where are you going? Oh, we're going clubbing up to this really grotty nightclub. She went, oh, okay, maybe I'll come out later. Okay, fine. I'm thinking, no, they probably paid her to say that. Go into the nightclub. Couple of beers, looking around. Yeah, okay, feeling a bit crap. Went for a piss, came back, and there's a low-hanging beam, and I twatted my head on this beam. And I was like, ah! And this voice behind me went, oh, are you okay? And I turned round, and this is absolute vision of loveliness, who is now my wife for the last 20, God knows how many years, 21 years. And she started chatting to me, and we just clicked. And if you listen to the lyrics of the Pulp song, Something Changed, the lyrics are, I wrote this song 2 hours before we met. And it was something like, I don't know what you look like yet. I could have stayed at home and gone to bed or gone to watch a film instead. And that's exactly what happened to me when I met my wife. Yeah. And it's brilliant. And it still gives me goosebumps, even talking about it now. Wow. Because something did actually change. And when you talk about managing change and adapting to change, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just change. It's just there, right? Yeah. But had I not gone out, had I stayed in, had I gone to the cinema, had I not gone to that nightclub, had I not twatted my head, I wouldn't have met her. Yeah. And on the plus front, I spent 2 hours talking to her tits because I couldn't hear a word she was saying. I thought she was a mate by the end of the night. I was too drunk to see her.
That's a bollocks excuse, but it's a very, very good story and actually a very good point because, you know, there's been a few people on here who've talked about like those almost like sliding doors moments where, you know, a decision has, as you've said, taken you down one path. That could have quite easily have been you, you know, with your head stuck where it was going, no, I'm not coming out. And you might never have met the love of your life. Yeah. And I think interestingly, it's like, you know, testament to the fact that, you know, if people are complaining about how shitty their life is, but they're not doing anything different, then how do you expect anything to change if nothing changes, right?
Exactly.
You know, so one of the easiest ways to take something in another direction is just to try something, right?
And the other thing was, I think, coming out of my first marriage, and I felt so lousy about myself, and I pinned loads of guilt on me. And anyone that's split up from someone knows it's always 6 of one, half dozen of the other. She actually made me feel better about myself and kind of pressed the reset button.
Yeah.
And those of you that may remember, if you were at Wickham at the time, she was a chef in the civilian chef at Holton.
Yeah.
And she actually left Holton because I got her a job at Wickham because it paid more. And so we'd often go to work together. So we'd sit down there. And I remember, I don't know who was on shift for me, but one Christmas Eve, I was on shift because Lena was on shift. And I rang her up at the kitchen at Wickham, and she's like, oh, I've got all these potatoes to peel. I was like, I'll help you with this. And I rang around the comm centre and stuff, and there's about 4 or 5 of us went up there, and we peeled all the potatoes for her on Christmas Eve.
Oh.
I made the Christmas dinner. There was also other things we did in certain quiet parts of the bunker that I'm not prepared to discuss.
I'm not asking. And
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. And strangely enough, our child was conceived shortly after that. There's no correlatory link to that whatsoever. No.
Pulp. A lot to answer to.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say my child was conceived with Pulp then. I was like,
what would you listen, you've already gone
down to biology, really, or lust, not pulp, but there you go.
We're back to the Baileys and lime, aren't we?
Oh, God, yeah.
So
funny enough, that little baby that we had is now 21 and she's on her final year at child and mental health nursing degree at Southampton. So it shows how quickly the years go, right?
Doesn't have. Two children or
3.
Not 3.
Lucy's a nurse student at Southampton. Danielle is a law student in Nottingham, and Joe is a cybersecurity student at Portsmouth.
Right.
And I'm selling my kidneys for £1 if anyone wants to buy them because I've got no wedge.
You're not going to get anything for those kidneys, mate. You've 2 pints and a prostate like that. You need to piss every 20 minutes. And
there you go. There you go.
And you used to drink Baileys and lime and snake
No,
biting
God, no.
charges in. Nobody wants your kidneys. No,
well, they can put them in a jar and go, look, this is how bad they are.
About that. So all those years in the military, and we've spoken a little bit about what you did afterwards as well. What do you think is the biggest thing that you learned from the military?
I was always presentable. And I would always, even before the cadets, but I loved it in the cadets because it was like, right, pull your shoes, iron your shirt, do this. And when I got to basic training, I was teaching other people how to do it. I was always punctual. I think the military taught me that there's all aspects to human life in the military, right? So you had the really nice people. You had the arse kissers, you had the bullies, you had people that liked the sound of their own voice. There were people that you had to blow smoke up their arse to get your own way. And it made you adapt to what people are like. So there's a lot of human life there. I think one of the things that it really taught me was you can always adapt, but you can't beat the system. So you couldn't, I don't think that you could in any way manipulate things to your advantage.
Yeah.
Or if you could, I was never any good at it. No. So coming out of the military world into civilian life, I had all these like skills. So I could present, I can teach, I look smart, I was on time, I knew how to put logbooks together, I was good at computers. And the civilian world kind of went, wow, we'll have you. Thank you very much. And to me, I'm like, really? You sure about that? Have you looked at me? I'm not that impressive, you know? And I think that further down the line, I've always been able to stand up and talk, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that you could actually turn that into a living. and there's a lot of people that don't like doing it. There's a lot of people that can't sort of like stand up and talk. And I'll never forget, I was working for a company and I was working with Dell. And I was in Finland. And I was supposed to remote back on this big screen to the Dell labs in Limerick in Ireland at the time. So they built all these servers and my job was to demonstrate the software that's on the servers in Limerick. And I had the Britney Spears kind of, sort of flesh-coloured microphone like this. I was like doing the whole, hi everyone, hi, I'm Tony, I'm going to hear and talk to you about all this, blah, 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 blah. And now we're going to do this. Look behind me, the screen went blank. And they lost the link. 500 people in front of me. And you heard the audience go, ooh. And I kind of looked there and I was like, fucking hell, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, what'd you do?
I went, right then, so we can talk about something else while I'm here. And I kept the audience going for half an hour until they brought it back.
Wow.
How I did it, I've got no idea. No idea.
What did you talk about?
Oh, all sorts. Talked about what I was actually going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm like, right, picture in the head, you're looking at a Windows operating system. Picture in the head, you press the start button. Is anyone not following me? Yeah, right, okay. Now we're going to do this, and now we're going to talk about this. So before we go any further, this means that, and that means this. Has anyone got any questions? No? Crack on. Brilliant. And they would finish. So Finnish people don't show any emotion. So they sit there like that. And you go, has anyone got any questions? And they go, it's like, shit, I can't pad that out. I padded it out for half an hour. And when it came back and I finally went, right, we've got it back. I'm just going to go through what I've done again. Hope you found that interesting. Thank you very much. And they all stood up and started clapping. I'm like, really? These are Finnish people. They don't do that. And I was chuffed to bits with that.
Yeah.
And that little moment of sheer blind panic. And I think that's what some of the things the military taught me, that you can adapt.
Yeah.
Because what would I have done if I'd just walked off?
Well, this is it. You talk, when we talked about change there, and you're talking about all these little changes, and similarly, with all of the kinds of different people that you mentioned that you would meet, arse kissers, bullies, those that like the sound of their own voice.
Yeah.
So in kind of all of your time in the military, is there was kind of every day you'd have to, as you got to know people and understand and kind of how to, be building rapport with different people, would take sort of different, approach. And is there any time that sticks out where somebody who was, a particular, whatever kind of person required a massive period of you having to adapt?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that now that I couldn't do then, and I think that was the biggest source of frustration, is you could not react. You weren't allowed to react because people would hide behind their rank.
Right.
And you would choke the living shit out of someone if they spoke to you the way that I was spoken to by certain people while I was in there.
Yeah.
I always remember at Wickham, there was a squadron leader that everybody hated. Everyone hated. And I thought, right, I'm going to try something different because this guy was a prick. And, 9 out of 10 cats aren't wrong when they say the guy's a prick. So all I did was I adapted my thing, and whatever he said, I said, yeah. And I went, that's a great idea. That is, thanks for that. Really good. Really appreciate that, sir. Well done. And he was the one that said,
did everybody else then think you were an arse kisser?
No, because everyone knew how bitter and twisted I was. And everyone knew, like, Wickham was the graveyard. You know that. I mean, I'll come on to another story in a minute.
Yeah.
This particular squadron leader said to me, he went, I know, Bambury, that you're going out in a couple of years. I know that you're doing your college course. He went, so don't come in tonight. He said, go and do your course. When your course is finished, come back about 10:30 and then do your night shift then. And he was brilliant. And on one Christmas, he was like, right, go and sit upstairs with your girlfriend. He said, don't sit down here with me. And for some reason, he liked me. And I don't know whether I didn't stand up to him, but it was more a case of I kind of learned his language.
Yeah.
And for those of you that may or may not have known him, he actually had a Sinclair C5. And he said that he was going to peddle the Sinclair C5 from the officers' mess at Wickham to the ops site. And there's another story on that. Lena got one of her friends in who was a chef, and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was on. And this squadron leader was up there, and this chef who was a civvy turned around and went, you wouldn't be any good on that, would you? And he went, why is that? Why is that? He goes, well, who would you do when it says come to phone a friend?
Oh dear.
And you know about Wickham being the graveyard, right? You and I both know a rather overweight flight lieutenant who managed to get herself caught in the turnstile at the bunker because she was so chubby. And she was on shift with you, and I was next door, right? And you come in literally like you are now. And you told me, and we're in tears, right? And you had to spend the entire night shift in the missile warning cell with her, desperately trying not to piss yourself laughing. And I remember ringing you up. I'm like, hello? She's still calling the turnstile. And then you held it together brilliantly. And you told me that she said to you, and said, thank you, Corporal Richardson, for your decorum on that subject. And in reality, you told everyone that she was a fat cow that got caught in a turnstile, and literally everybody knew but her.
I did not. I would never do that.
Well, you told me, and I told everybody. That's what it was. Oh yeah.
Possibly.
I had nothing to lose.
I felt so bad that
I
night.
thought it was hysterical. It's like, I'm sorry, but you're so chubby you can't walk through a football turnstile.
But do you not remember who it was that stopped to try and help her through? It was Karen.
Yes.
Because I had kind of gone through and I almost started laughing when I saw her, but I kind of I thought, no, I have to work with you. And I was like, and I thought, what am I going to, and I saw it and I was like, well, actually, there's nobody can really do anything here because, and I just kind of like looked and I didn't want to laugh and I just went, almost nothing to see here, move on.
You couldn't move on because you blocked the turnstile, so you couldn't get through. So it's like,
Karen kind of, she must have come in. She must have come in literally just after me. So because I scarpered and Karen literally stopped to help her through.
Now you see that's testament to your lovely wife, because let's be fair, right?
Why Karen was
knowing Karen as she is,
in a bag, I don't know.
Knowing Karen as she is, she's probably gone, oh, I'm so sorry, Mom. Let me see what I can do to help you. If that had been you, you'd have gone, ha! Look at you! You fat cow! You can't get through the turnstile! And then you would have run off. And I can literally picture, because I came into that warning cell. I came into that warning cell, and she was there reading the Times, looking all, the Times is up like this, right? And I came into the warning cell, and I came through the side door, because as it was, you had two doors to the warning cell, right? You had the door from the corridor and the door from the EAS squadron, and you'd sit there, right? She's here. I've come in and put my head round the door, and I've looked at you, and all I see is this. Wow. Yeah, your little shoulders are doing 10 to the dozen. And I sort of walked out, and I was in bits in the corridor, and absolute bits. Of course, yeah, by then everyone else knew. So, there are times for decorum, dear mate, but there's times where you just got to let the world know.
This is it.
Yeah,
this is it. I'm all about the sharing of stories, me, always.
But it's testament to Karen that she handled it so well and so in such a diplomatic way.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course
it is. It shows the fact that she was far more mature than you and I put together. Let's be fair.
I think that goes without saying, doesn't it?
It's probably still the same, really, isn't it?
It's still the same. Chris has said he's heard that story.
Yeah.
And he's also mentioned, now this would be interesting. I've asked this gentleman if he might make an appearance on here as well. He's not answered me. Or maybe I've he said Gary Wright has another story about her.
Yeah.
There you go. That tells you everything you need to know about my good lady wife, doesn't it? What else could I do?
Lovely. Frankly, mate, you've punched above your weight a long time with her, and how she stayed with you after all these years. She must have the patience of a saint.
Good chance that's a good time to move on for another song, isn't it? It is. Right then. This one, certainly, do you know what I'm going to have to do? Because we've got a couple of duplicates. We've got not many. There's one or two songs that have been chosen twice. I think this song has been chosen. Maybe, certainly the band has been chosen. But anyway, next song on the list is "Live Forever" by Oasis.
Yes. Now this song is, notwithstanding some of the best guitar riffs I've heard, Oasis broke through and it just blew my mind again. But when you and I was at CompuAir, there was this thing where you had to build this environment of 3 or 4 CompuAir products all linking to each other.
Yeah.
And they give you this phone book and they say, right, now go and do it. And I spent hours doing this bloody thing. And every time I hear "Live Forever," there's me sitting there going through these manuals and looking at it. And
at that time,
at the point where I was getting so annoyed, I'd stop and just listen to Noel Gallagher's riffs on the guitars.
Yeah.
And then I'd go, right, I've now got the strength to go back and do it again.
So it kind of give you the mental power to.
It literally did. It was. Imagine, so years ago, those that are old enough to remember, like ZX Spectrums and things, where you have to go and you buy the computer magazines and start typing things out. And after 4 hours of typing, you get to the very end and the bloody thing still didn't work.
Yeah.
That was exactly it.
Yeah.
I need to just hold that thought for 2 seconds.
Yeah. See, this is what happens when you get to this age. I've had this one bottle, which is now, it's now about finished. Tony mentioned to me just before we came on air. He said, "I'm on my second, so if I need to nip off, it's because he's getting old, and a couple of beers in, and he needs to go to the toilet every 20 minutes. This is what happens when you hit your 50s, right? I don't know. It's all right, Tony. I'll hold the fort whilst you're away." Do we have any questions? We've got some folks on. Is there anyone whilst he's nipped away? Is there anybody wants me to ask him anything? We use this opportunity, and I'll say hello to all of our audience, those that have come in tonight. Karen, Delta Mike,
prostate. Sorry,
Frankie, Chris.
And
I was asking if anybody watching had any questions that they wanted to ask you. But I've just realised
yes,
I've got something. Yeah, Frankie said, yeah, that's not changed in the last 30 years. Weak bladder.
oh, that's a bit rude. I liked you once as well, just once.
So I'm gonna ask you about this because I've got something that I'm gonna pop in the chat.
Mm.
I'm gonna pop in the chat a link there,
Oh, yes.
and I'm gonna pop it on the banner, and I'm gonna ask you to talk about this walk that you're doing.
Yeah,
because it's for Poppy Appeal, right?
it is. So within Adobe, in America, they have a massive veterans network.
Yeah.
So Adobe is a very inclusive company. They've got the Black Employee Network, they've got Pride, they've got Women at Adobe, they've got Pacific Islanders, they've got all sorts of veteran networks. We've got one in the UK for veterans, but there's only 3 of us in it because they don't employ enough veterans. So to try and raise the profile, we are organising a sponsored walk. The original plan was to go to the battlefields and walk there, but because of COVID, obviously you can't do that. So what we're doing is we are walking from the Adobe office in Old Street, and we're going to walk down to HMS Belfast. We're going to walk past the Imperial War Museum, and then we're going to walk to the Cenotaph and go to the Churchill War Museum, and we're going to put a wreath down by the Cenotaph, all being well, if I can find somewhere that sells me a poppy wreath. And we're looking for some sponsorship. So it's all going to the British Legion. I set up this Just Giving page. If you want to contribute, I'd be grateful. It'd be greatly appreciated. And as you can see at the minute, the only person that's putting the money on it is me. So I think I've done it a little bit too early. But if you feel like you've got more cash than you know what to do with,
what date did you say you're doing it?
I'm doing it a week on Monday, which is Monday the 1st.
Ah, right, okay.
And I'll be taking some pictures. I don't go on Facebook much these days, but I will be putting some stuff, and I can send some stuff to you. Because they give us T-shirts as well that says Adobe Veterans Network, which is lovely.
Oh,
And
nice.
we're just basically trying to raise the awareness. So if you feel the urge,
oh, you'll have one more sponsor, and we'll encourage our listeners to go and throw it. And I mean, anything for Poppy Appeal as well. Veterans Network. I mean, listen, this is why we're here, right? This is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Continue bringing people back together. If anybody's listened to any of the stories that you've spoken about so far, a few happy memories brought back. Well, do you know what? A couple of quid in for the walk. It's all for a great cause, isn't it?
And the other thing is, I see it as being environmentally friendly because every year I buy a shit ton of poppies, and 9 times out of 10 they fall out of my jacket, and then they litter the ground, and they find themselves in landfill.
Yeah.
So whilst I love buying poppies, then I think sponsoring a moron to go walking is equally.
Well, Chris has taken you at your word and done it already. Look, there you go.
Thank you, Chris. That's very good of you. Thank you. And that means a lot. Seriously, does mean a lot. So this is the first time I've done any fundraising stuff in years. And I thought, you see all these people. There was a guy on BBC South News, and he ran 1,000 miles in bare feet across America for his daughter that needed medical treatment. And I'm thinking, that inspiring man can do that. I'm sure I can walk about 5 miles in a day. I mean, I walk that much with my dogs, right? So, I thought I'd better do something this year. So that's what we're doing.
I love it.
We'll see how much we get.
Good on you. Good on you. Brilliant cause. I love to see it. Love to see all of that. So before we go on to your last song, I want to ask you about your gardening. I mentioned this in the intro, and so for those watching, listening, and I say watching stroke listening because we're in the process of obviously we're live on Facebook and YouTube, but I'm in the process of transferring all of these podcasts onto Spotify. So we've got the first 10 on already, and then in the next couple of weeks we're getting the rest of them all onto Spotify, and because the tunes are on there. So we'll put we'll go on to Spotify sooner or later. So watching or listening, anybody that's kind of watching or listening, may or may have not have heard some of the stuff that I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and some of the things that that we've been doing with these podcasts, and kind of how it's evolved. It started with some groups on Facebook on the back of some meetings, bringing guys together to just talk about, to chat shit, to talk through day-to-day life, to talk through any, problems, or even just getting stuff off their chest. And we took that online and we created a couple of groups, and we ran, as well as the sort of the forces reunions that we were doing these other ones within this group called the Brotherhood, which was just about guys just kind of talking about stuff together. And we did weekly meetings to start with. We did a few of them, and we had some guest presenters come on. And one of the things it started off, now correct me if I'm wrong, we got onto a conversation about gardening or something on one of the calls.
Yeah.
And then, without prompting, this amazing video, which was like, it was like an Alan Titchmarsh-esque,
Really?
masterclass of Bambury Towers, with from a guy who proclaimed, "I don't really know much about gardening," certainly had me hooked for like 10 minutes, or whatever it was, taking me around the garden. So whereabouts did that sort of love for the garden come in?
Well, so that's interesting. I mean, well, first of all, the video, a lot of the plants I describe in the video by their Latin name of green stuff, because I've got no idea what they are. And it was one of those, right, we'll just chuck that shit in there and we'll do that and we'll see if it grows or it doesn't. This came from, and this sounds really, I've turned into my dad. I mean, God, Gardener's World's a staple diet of our TV on a Friday night. It used to be like Hitman and Her, if those that remember all that. So me and the CEO have decided we're going to try and do something with the garden. And after the kids grew up, because the garden for them was the trampoline, so there was like, footballs and all that sort of crap kicking around. And when lockdown hit, Lena decided she wanted to do some work on the garden. And so hers was the glamorous bit of like the design. Mine was the awful bit, like laying bricks down to put some pots on, that kind of crap. And it sprung from there. And we just basically, Frankie, have you got the photo of that red kite? That's another story, mate. I'll tell you in a minute. We basically found a guy on Facebook that had taken pallets and turned them into planters. So we basically got 4 or 5 of them in a line in our back garden fence, chucked some soil and thought, right, we'll just chuck some shit in there. It'll grow or it won't. Now, whatever the shit was, I've got no idea. Lena grew it. And then we had another bit of where the trampoline was. She said, oh, can you turn it into like a raised bed? So I got some wood and I basically got a ton of soil. That was fun. Guy delivered it on the driveway and drove off, and I didn't have a barrow to move this ton of soil. I'm like, how's that going to work then? It was like, you can picture me with a shovel, one shovel full of soil, walking down the garden, dropping it down and coming back and getting another shovel. So we built that up, and then we just chucked some stuff in that, and it just kept growing and growing. And then the CEO gets this thing in her head, Aylesbury in Bloom garden competition this year. I was like, oh, fuck, I know where this is coming. So out of the blue, she signs up for these different categories like kitchen garden and vegetable garden and compact garden and this garden and that garden. And so this year she said she wanted to put some stuff in that. The video was taken in lockdown, where we just basically used gardening as a way of mental health and just trying to get through lockdown. Now I carried on working through lockdown, but she didn't. So her dog walking business collapsed. So she did all this gardening, right? So this year she enters Aylesbury in Bloom. The next thing I got paint fences and stuff, and we had petty officialdom come around with their clipboards, and there was these 2 little old ladies, and they knocked on the door, and I was like, darling, the officialdom are here to come and judge us. And these 2 little old ladies went, oh, that's good, that's good, that's good. And in September, we had to go to some hall somewhere, and there was a presentation evening. Now, those that know my wife, she hates any form of standing up or any kind of attention. So she would say I'm the attention seeker of the family, but she hates it. She got 4 prizes of, like, I think there was gold and silver gilt, silver and bronze, and she got 4 silver gilts, and she was very, very embarrassed. but we've actually got the certificates and stuff downstairs, and it all stems from the fact we just said, right, chuck that in there and see if it works. And when petty officialdom came around, this woman went, oh, you want to pull that up, darling, and put some plants in there. So we've been backwards and forwards to the garden centre in Tring, and they've got these cheap plants, so we just bought some and just slung them in. And actually, it's come out really well. Now, the flip side of this is she's had so many chilies, so many tomatoes, that she's made chutneys and all sorts. And I've almost got a glut of them. So if any of you come visiting or wandering by, we have chilies that abound, and we love it, you know. And it's just been really good. It's been good for the mental health. It's been good for her to focus. It's been good for generally taking shape of things. And we had some savings, and I cashed some in, and we bought a new garden seat set and a gazebo. So basically, most of the summer we don't sit inside the house at all. We just sit outside.
Yeah.
And to square the circle, any of you that live in Buckinghamshire or have been to Buckinghamshire, our native bird is the red kite, and they're everywhere, and they're beautiful birds of prey. And there's this one red kite that sits on a tree 2 gardens down from mine, and it sits there watching me. And we've got a hot tub, so I'm in the hot tub. The thing watches me in the hot tub, or it watches me in the garden. And I was saying to Frankie last time I saw him when he came down, this red kite would come over my house, swooping majestically like this, and I'd dash and get my camera. And just as I get the camera, this bird would go like that and then disappear. And I've been trying to get a picture of this bloody bird because I want to have a tattoo of it. I've got one tattoo up here, and I want to get another one here. And I can't get this fucking red kite to save my life. Frankie's like got the zoom lens, and he'll probably just come and go, click, there you go, I've got one for you. It's not the point. I want to get this bloody bird, and every time it swoops low, looks at me and goes, no, I'm going to turn that way now, so you can't see me. And I'm going to go that up.
You could,
but yeah, I mean,
hide a security camera somewhere that you know it's going to wear, and you know it's going to catch it.
Now the security cameras in the front garden to stop people nicking my caravan. So you know we go caravanning a lot, so we can't use that. But it hasn't got a zoom lens on the security camera anyway. But we back onto fields, and some of the fields are being turned into a housing estate, which is awful. But this beautiful red kite, the wingspan's about 6 foot long. It's absolutely gorgeous. I think it's a male. It's been there for years, and it just sits on this branch every day. And in my house, we've got a loft conversion, which is my eldest daughter's room. And I was even up there, out the window, hanging out the window with a camera, trying to get this red kite. And it sat there on this tree, looked at me, and I kind of went like that. And it just turned on its ass and flew off. I was like, you bastard.
So you've not got it yet?
No. I might just get one off the internet and say it was that one.
Yeah.
No.
So you mentioned about the garden and about it kind of being good for the mental health. How have you been? Like, how's lockdown treated you generally?
I haven't stopped working. I work from home. Adobe shut its offices, and they basically said the new way of working is hybrid. And they said you don't have to come in the office. So why do I want to travel 2 hours into London and 2 hours out again when I can sit at my desk? I walk my dogs in the morning.
Yeah,
I have 2 dogs, 2 little white fluffy monsters that I absolutely adore. They go out in the morning, they go out in the afternoon. Did a lot of fishing, and if you've never been fishing, everyone should try fishing at least once. Have you seen Mortimer and Whitehouse go fishing on BBC Two?
I remember you telling me about this before, and I also remember at Wickham you telling me about fishing. Because did you not go fishing with that other chef, Mick?
Yeah. That was funny because we went fishing and he was a real pothead. And at the time he said,
was he ever? You know about, I'm going to let you tell, I'll let you tell me this, because you remember when I took him to Reading Festival and he got me to stop at the corner shop in Reading so he could go get a bottle of vodka.
Yeah.
And as he got out, there was like this big pouch. I was just due to leave at this time. It was a massive pouch. And I handed it to him when he got back in the car, and I was like, mate. And he went, oh yeah. He goes, don't worry. He goes, it's there. You know, if you want any, you can have some. And I was like, there's a bit of me kind of going, I would actually really love to have some. However, I do know that, and at that point in time, Reading Festival and Wickham, because of the close proximity to it, the guys from the random drug testing, the CDT boys,
Yep.
they were knocking on the door like every flipping August at Wickham, straight
Yep.
after Wedding Festival, and I was like, no way am I
Yep.
going to be doing that. And I remember he was at his tent, and he was like that. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want any?
I remember going fishing with him, and we're sitting. There's a lake going towards Bicester, and it's a beautiful lake, and you've got rolling fields behind it. It's a natural man-made lake. It's like literally looks like an advert for a fishing holiday. So it's a beautiful lake, lots of like swims where you sit and fish. You got the trees, everything, and it's wonderful. And I sat there fishing with him. We were going for carp, and we were there all day. So I was fishing to the left, and I just put a load of like luncheon meat out on a big hook. He was over that way with his float. 5 minutes in, he pulls out a bottle of vodka. I was like, oh, man, I've got to drive. He's like, well, I'll have some. He's glugging around this vodka like it's water. Then he sparks up this big spliff, and I didn't have to smoke any. I was just downwind of it. And I got up, and then I realized that my legs had suddenly decided to lose all capability of having bones in them. And I just collapsed on the bank. I just couldn't, literally, I was just like, no, I'm fine. Gone. Just literally gone. And I'm laying there going, I'm trying to process what on earth had happened. Yeah. And I didn't realize I was downwind of him all that time. But yeah, I thought he was going to join a reggae band. I mean, Christ.
He was a good guy, actually. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him, to be honest with you. I lost contact with him.
Yeah. There we go.
I was going to ask you something, because since leaving the RAF, you've developed all these talents. I mean, I thought there was always there bubbling under. I always thought you'd write something. I always thought you were a bit of a poet. And I remember reading some of your early poetry, which was quite good, by the way. What gave you the inspiration for all the drugness that was in your book?
All the what? The drugness?
All the drugs that was in your book.
Well, I didn't have to think too much. I freaking took most of them.
I was going to say, was that pre or was that post?
Does during count?
I was always shit scared of getting caught by the drug squad.
I mean, I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure. I always say that those rumors were. It was always. It was suggested, or it was claimed. It was, it was. Yeah. So there was there's a lot of elaboration. In there. There's a lot of Hollywooding for the purpose of the book, but
poetic
I still reckon the book's about 90%. So I guess to answer your question properly, there were things that I could pick from, and I've always had a bit of a I've always had an imagination that can run off on a tangent. I've always had a decent, a creative imagination.
Yes.
And I think that an interesting one when you talk about weed, right? About our pal Mick there, and about where the inspiration came from, the drugness, if you will, right? Now, I think that the book kind of spoke about a whole raft of drugs, right? A whole raft of drugs. And I'm not...
Most of which you've done.
And I'm not here to kind of say, go and do drugs, kids, right? But neither am I here to say that what I would say is that a lot of drugs that will do people most harm are ones that they're getting on prescription from a doctor. I know, controversial, but things like marijuana, for example, these days taken in medical situations, and I know my wife's going to be like, you dick, what are you doing talking about this? The reality is that, there is something that was 20 years ago, you're a pothead, you're this, that, and the other. And now already, CBD is legal, for example.
No, you're not wrong.
Scientifically, it helps people with depression, anxiety, helps people get to sleep. And if CBD is legal, she's got her face on. Then the THC stuff that actually, my belief is that it can help creativity as well. But anyway, it's
on a certain level about prescription drugs doing people more harm than good. A few years ago, I had to have a a camera inserted somewhere where the sun doesn't shine, and they gave me a prescription to help clear me out. And I can honestly say that was the worst medicine I've ever had in my life. I basically shat for 4 days. So yeah, some medicines aren't that good on prescription. If I wanted to shit for 4 days, I could have done it under my own steam, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I'm not saying all. I'm just saying, over the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time on kind of trying to be more healthier myself. Look after myself, just take a little bit more care of myself. And one of the things that I've done is I looked long and hard at my diet. I've done a lot of juicing, which is kind of flooding the body with nutrients, and the effects that
my juicing.
Yeah, or there is that as well. You can flood your body with Stella. But in actual fact, the benefits that a decent diet and the right nutrients in your body can do.
Yeah.
How many people take a lot of concoctions of drugs, and how many of the drugs that they take are to combat side effects that some of the other drugs give them,
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I'm not sure how we got on there. You talk about drugs, but yeah. So there you go.
Now that I'm in, when I was 20, it was like, I'll try some of this, I'll try some of that. Looking at it now, I'm like 50 and a year and a bit. I'm like, no, I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. It stinks and basically turns you into a crazy person.
No, but do you know what? Do you know what I see stinks and turns people into crazy people more than anything?
What?
Well, you just lifted up a bottle of it.
I can only have four.
I have to say, over the years, that has been responsible for 99.999% of the ridiculous and stupid things I've done in my life. But then, if I hadn't done them, then, God, it would have been boring, wouldn't it?
Because of that, I remember collapsing outside a Brown block with Rob Huff one night after going to the Naffy Bot, and we lay there for 3 hours on a summer's evening counting the stars in the sky. I was like, I can see another one over there. I see another one over there. How many is that, mate? 3. I've lost count. Let's start again. That went on for hours. It was like Beavis and Butthead. It was ridiculous.
Beavis and Butthead do philosophy and astrophysics.
Yeah, this is true.
We've got one more tune, haven't we?
Oh, God, yeah. Now, this one is epic.
AC/DC, Thunderstruck.
Yeah, and let me tell you why this resonates. Notwithstanding, it's been responsible for 2 of the best evenings that I've had. 3, actually. 3. In reverse order, Frankie Blunden got me to the Sergeant's Mess for their summer ball at Wickham shortly after I'd left. Ironic, that's the only chance I ever got to get to the Sergeant's Mess. But they had Thunderstruck on and we danced to that, as I recall. The second time was I was in Dublin with a friend of mine that I was working with, and we was in this bar, and we didn't realize it was like a real hip bar. Really, like, pretty young things all over the place and handsome young men all over the place. And we felt very out of place, and we're standing there, and you sort of get the riffs of the start of Thunderstruck. You get the na 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 na, and the whole bar was just doing this. I looked around and was like, oh, hang on a second, I recognize that song. And that kicked in, and it was, the whole place was just literally bouncing. The third time, I was in Utah, in Salt Lake City, when I worked for an IT company that was based there. And because Utah in the American state is a dry state, when the Europeans come to town, they don't have bars. They have a members club where you pay $5 to get in for the week for the members club. So basically, it was like $2 to the pound. So everything was like ridiculously cheap. So we basically, the first night there, knocked on the door. The guy opened it. About 50 of us rushed in. We dropped like a couple $100 and went, right, we're here for the week. And he said, right, go downstairs. And downstairs was pool tables, air hockey, dartboard. And the first song went on was Thunderstruck. Brilliant. And it was brilliant. And we had organised pool night, and it was just excellent. It was just one of those nights where you're giggling, the music's great, you don't want it to end. About 4 a.m, you stagger back to your hotel because your first meeting's at 7, one of those. And every time I hear Thunderstruck. And years later, actually, the fourth story, when Lucy was little, she used to go horse riding at Holton. And I was trying to get her into rock music, and I kept playing it. And she'd come off the horse ride and she's sitting in the back of the car, and I turned it up loud. And as the song said, "You've been thunderstruck," there was a bolt of lightning and a thunderstorm ahead of us, and the lightning struck. I was like, you couldn't even make that shit up. It was brilliant. And every time I play it, I say to her, "Do you remember that about the lightning?" She went, "Yes, yes. Now turn your noisy rock music down, you old fart." So yeah, it's one of those songs that when you start hearing it, you hear the thunder, and you look around and someone in the room's doing this. You know.
They out of the mouths of babes, as they say. One of the things, it was Mr. Paul Bennett actually, when I left Wickham, left the Air Force, and I'd taken a book just for people to sign when I left, and Paul Bennett wrote in because his good lady wife was pregnant at that time with Harvey, their eldest son, and he wrote in something there about children teaching you, your own children teaching you lessons.
Yeah.
And I think as we get, or as they get older, there's definitely a phase where they certainly start to believe that they already know more than you. You are familiar with this phase as well.
We went to Disneyland in America when the kids were little, and you see them all prancing down the road, and there's Mickey doing all this, and I went, like, Joseph was the smallest one, he was the youngest one. "It's Mickey Mouse," and Danielle leaned over and went, "It's a person dressed as Mickey Mouse, Dad. It's not real." I'm like, all right, don't kill the vibe. Like, I
think when we did those whole character things when we went to Disney, when I saw Karen's face when we went to have pictures taken with Tinkerbell.
All right, yeah.
Japan.
I remember.
And do you know what? Do you know who was the big? I hope that there's nobody that absolutely. Do you know who the biggest disappointment? I mean, I grew up, as we all did, right? Disney movies and Disney princesses galore, right? And you kind of meet them, and it's somebody said to me before we went over there. They went, "It's just like being immersed. It's like being in the films."
Mm-hmm.
And there is a bit of that, especially when you go and have your picture taken with them. I loved all that, but the one person that really disappointed was Snow White, who we all agreed was just way too perky. They'd like chosen somebody on the perky scale that was like Perky McPerk from like Perksville, Perkin, United States of Perk.
She probably had some of that shit that you used to take combined with some sugar. She's probably off her tits. Hello. When I stop, it's really going to hurt, but now it's great.
I got within about a meter of her. I was like, "Get away from me." Get away, Snow White. Where are your dwarf?
I remember taking Joseph when he was about 6 to a Star Wars convention because he loves Star Wars. I mean, I love Star Wars. I like the first 3 Star Wars, and I know that Dave Large is a Star Wars fan as well. And anyone that's got the slightest iota of Star Wars likeness will tell you that the second set of 3 films was a load of toss, and the third ones aren't much better. There's me sitting on the fence. Took him to a Star Wars convention, and he was in raptures all day because you'd have the stormtroopers come up, and bearing in mind he was 5, and the stormtrooper's 6 foot with a gun giving it. "These aren't the droids we're looking for." He would go nuts, and he loved it. Total character immersion. And I'll never forget it. He said to me, "Can we go and get Darth Maul's autograph?" Yeah, let's go and get Darth Maul's autograph. Until you got to the queue, and Darth Maul's autograph was 50 quid. Because you had to stand there and get a picture while this knobhead that used to be Darth Maul, that didn't even have his face mark, would just basically sit and do that and sign a book. And you had to pay 50 quid. I was like, "No, we ain't doing that." That's not Darth Maul. That's just some man dressed up as him. It's like, "Okay, can we go now?" "Yeah, all right, we'll go then."
Do you know what? You're not going to believe I've actually got written down. There's like five sort of like quick fire questions. I always kind of throw up half a dozen or so really quick ones in to just close things off. And one of the quick ones, and I think part of the reason that I threw this in tonight was, you know yourself, having worked in IT for so many years, how many times have you either been on the receiving end of somebody in an interview, or been in an interview where somebody that you've sat with, or even asked the question in an interview of somebody whether or not they prefer Star Trek or Star Wars? That could be a deal breaker on a job.
So if you was an IT sales guy, you would say something like, well, I believe there shouldn't be an either or, because then you're labeling people with one thing or another. And I think everyone should basically be uniform, and then you can make an informed choice.
Oh. So Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars, clearly. Only the first three. Oh, I have to say this. You need to look on YouTube, and you need to look for Gary the Stormtrooper.
Okay.
Right?
Gary the Stormtrooper.
Gary the Stormtrooper. There's a comedy series called Robot Chicken, and what they've done is they've taken Star Wars minifigures.
Yeah.
Gary the Stormtrooper lives with his wife and little toddler child.
Yeah.
And I sent a link over to Andy and Frankie about Gary the Stormtrooper running over an Ewok. And I'll just leave it there. But do yourself a favor and go and look for Gary the Stormtrooper on YouTube.
Right.
You won't be disappointed. I promise you that.
I will. I've got a few more questions though before I do that. Before I let you go, we've done well tonight. Just over an hour and a half.
No.
And it's flown by.
It has.
It's absolutely flown by. So I've got a few more questions. One I'm particularly interested in. One I don't know. So I've got down here, football or rugby?
Both. Okay. More leaning towards rugby. I've been a rugby fan for years, and I used to help out at the rugby club when my son played it. I absolutely love watching the internationals, anything with England in it, or any of the internationals anyway, because it's a higher standard rather than the Premiership stuff. But I got bitten with the Rugby World Cup when the kids were babies, and I've loved it ever since. Now, rugby is confusing, but get Rugby for Dummies, and it will explain everything. But I love it. Football, I do enjoy watching. I used to be really addicted to football, but nowhere near as much now.
All right. Who's your team?
Over the years, I've kind of flitted and floated around. For years, Lena was a Chelsea fan, so I kind of thought, well, if she likes Chelsea, I like Chelsea, because if she likes Chelsea and I like Chelsea, I might get laid more. That didn't work, by the way. Chelsea have won. Yeah, Dr. Love's in town.
This is why I've always had a soft spot for Middlesbrough, clearly.
It's like, Chelsea's won. I've got a soft spot for you, darling. That didn't work.
Did it work for you? It didn't work for me.
The Rohypnol worked a treat. So did the night nurse. Have one of those in your coffee. Lucy's gone down to Southampton, and I've kind of kept an eye on them because she's down there, and they are shit. And I think supporting a shit football team is actually better than supporting one that's very good, because it's more of an expectation. And I can't really say I'm an avid supporter of anything on that. I just like watching football in general. But the Six Nations I absolutely love, and the Autumn Internationals I love, and the Rugby World Cup I absolutely love. So, and Scotland have done very well in the rugby, haven't they? Scotland beat England in the last Six Nations match.
Yeah,
Scotland are doing well in the football. I mean, it's good.
Yeah,
indeed.
Okay, two more questions. Vindaloo or Korma?
Vindaloo.
Get in.
Korma's got cream in it. Ugh. Like curry flavoured milkshake. Fuck off.
I wasn't sure, but when you started talking about the chilies in the garden, I thought, yeah, you got to be into this.
Oh God, yeah.
So one last question before we wrap up, and thank all of our listeners, watchers for tuning in tonight.
Was there more than two? Was there? I haven't got a list.
There were lots more. You'd be very surprised.
No, just for me. Bless you. Well, clearly, there's nothing on telly. Obviously,
It was well into double figures, mate. Well into double figures.
What, you mean like 11?
Maybe even 12 at one point.
Oh, shit. No, really? I'm impressed.
What seems to
Clearly,
happen is more people watch on playback as well. So
you've got nothing better to do. It's a school night that's not a school night. There's nothing on telly, and Netflix is showing something you don't want to watch. Oh, Squid Game's brilliant, by the way. Do that.
do you know, I thought about this earlier on, and I was like, I wonder how long. I'm going to not mention it, but I wonder how long before somebody mentions Squid Game on one of the podcasts.
You see,
What an absolute load of complete craziness. But I loved
when
it.
you said that, when you said I thought about this, I thought you were going to say I could picture you being in Squid Game, and I'll guarantee you wouldn't last till the end.
No, I wasn't going to say. Well, why would I say that? If you were in Squid Game, you know that big doll that that turns their head. That's probably what you would be.
No, I'll probably shout out, "This is a load of fucking bollocks," and I would have got shot in the face for my trouble.
Right. So actually, you've kind of almost answered the question that I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, what are you reading at the moment that you would recommend, or what podcast are you listening to that you would recommend?
Right. So it depends what you like. In later life, as I've got older, I've said I'm always spending time outside, and I've really connected with countryside nature and that kind of thing. And bear with me on this because it sounds really nerdy and dull. I do a lot of walking outside with the dogs, and where I live, there's a lot of hedgerows, there's a lot of fields, there's a lot of woods and stuff. So I got into reading Country File magazine, Countryside magazine. I've read The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. If anyone's not listened to the audiobook or read the book, it's a woman and her husband who basically lose their house because they got screwed over by a friend of theirs, and they become homeless, and they actually walk from Minehead in North Somerset all the way round to Land's End and then round to Poole. They got no money, they got no house, they got no jobs, they got no prospects, but she wrote it and how they did it. That's really good. I often try and read anything that's connected to like the outdoors and outside. So I read the Yorkshire Vet, I've read the Yorkshire Shepherdess stuff. I've read a lot of military history. Agent Zigzag, Operation Mincemeat. There's a film coming out about Operation Mincemeat. Read the book. It's brilliant. Ben McIntyre. Anything by Ben McIntyre is just brilliant, frankly.
Right.
Do you know the story of Mincemeat?
No.
Right. Okay. I won't spoil it too much, but Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond books, was in MI6, and they wanted to fool the Germans into thinking that there was going to be an Allied invasion somewhere where it wasn't. So they basically concocted an idea of floating a dead body off the coast of Portugal that contained false information about a proposed landing.
Okay.
And that's how, and the book goes into how they did it. It's brilliant. There is a film coming out. If you get a chance to watch the film, there was a film in the 50s called The Man Who Never Was.
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Ben McIntyre wrote the book. Anything by him is brilliant. Anything military history by them, if that's your thing. So the other one that's really good is I read Pamela Stevenson's biography of Billy Connolly. And Billy Connolly was a hero of mine. I think he's brilliant. And if you've ever seen one of his videos called Billy and Albert, where he's live at the Albert Hall, absolutely pissed my sides. I was in the Falklands. I've seen it before I went to the Falklands. When I was down there, I was feeling really fed up, and I watched that, and I was in pieces. And the book tells the fact that 5 minutes before he goes on stage, he said to Pamela Stevenson, "I've got no idea what I'm going to say to these people because I've forgotten all my jokes." And then he just walked straight out on stage in front of the entire Albert Hall, and he starts talking and delivered the set of his life. So
unbelievable.
Oh, guy's a legend.
We could have another hour and 45 minutes about Billy Connolly, probably alone.
You know, all that. Yeah. He said about when he was on the set of Mrs. Brown, where Judi Dench's the queen and he was John Brown, the servant.
Yeah.
He said, if you watch one scene of that, she's on a horse, because he stands in the rain and he's waiting outside, and the queen goes, "Why is John Brown standing in the rain?" And she goes out and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I thought you'd like a ride." So it's raining. So it doesn't matter. She gets on the horse and they walk away. And as they're walking away, what you see is the horse's arse Judi Dench's back and Billy Connolly walking. He said, if you look closely, we're both doing that because the horse is farting all the way it starts walking off. He said, literally. Yeah, we can do one Billy Connolly to death.
Oh, I love it. A Billy Connolly gag to close what's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me tonight. It's been an absolute privilege.
I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. I came on with lots of trepidation, and I've watched other podcasts where people say it's quite cathartic and people go really nervous, didn't know what to say. I kind of didn't want to touch on I've got a stinking attitude in the RAF because I had a bad attitude because I wasn't promoted. And I wasn't going to go anywhere near any of that, because when you reach the end of a journey and you move on, you look back and go, do you know what? I wasn't the right place, right time, right thing for me to be in. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've learned is just to let go of the past and just live in the now and just keep moving forward. Right. Because it really just works out in the end.
Yeah.
And I always remember the guard post at Wickham, right? It was raining, it was cold, I was miserable, I was disillusioned, I hated it, I wanted to leave. And I read a thing on the wall at the guard post at Wickham where someone had scrawled some graffiti and they said, do you know anyone that's ever left the RAF and been unemployed and unhappy? No, makes you think, doesn't it? And that stayed with me all these years, because everybody that I know that have left has done well. The people that have stayed in has done well. So I think it's just the path that you're on, right? And at the end of the day, you've just got to be happy because you travel this road but once, right?
Exactly. Amen to that.
Just let go of the nastiness, live in the now, forget about the past. Just try and be happy. And that's literally, the world doesn't see you as you see you, right? You're walking along down the street, you look at someone, you don't know what's going on in their head, they don't know what's going on in yours. So do you know what? Just be nice.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And drink more beer.
Wise words indeed.
And watch Gary the Stormtrooper. Change your life for the better. It will change your life for the better. If you're feeling low, watch that. That and Austin Powers Gold Member. Best, funniest film I've ever seen in my life.
Brilliant. Right, let's say goodnight to our listeners. And you can stay in the green room for 5 minutes.
Yeah, but thank you for joining. Why have you joined? Why did you listen to me rabble on for 2 hours? What's the matter with you? Go and do something better. You know, I'm sure there's something on Netflix. Watch Clarkson's Farm. That's funny. More funny than me. You know, what's the matter with you all? But thank you for watching and joining in. And if you watch this on catch up, then you must be really fucking bored. But thank you, Karen. It's lovely to see you virtually. You're an absolute saint. Why you put up with him all these years, I've got no idea. And Chris and Frankie and Mike and everyone that's generally said hello to me in the past. I've held you all in very high esteem, and I've obviously missed out people's names, but you know who you are, and I think you're all great. So thank you.
Lovely words. Thank you very much indeed. So to you all, thank you. We'll be back this time next week with another guest. I'm not telling you who it is. I'm not telling you who it is just yet. I like to keep everybody on their toes.
It does.
But as always, anybody that has any requests, it has been known in the past that we've made requests from our listeners happen. So if there's somebody that you want to see, you want to listen to, if there's somebody that you know has a story, then just get in touch. And we'll see what we can do.
It's got to top the Anne Clark in the Turnstile story, though. I'm telling you, it's got to be that.
Tune in next week at 8 o'clock for another JFDI podcast. I'm Mr. Pinkster. I'm out, and this has been Tony Bambury. We shall speak to you all later. Good night.
West Side.